Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming today. We're here to talk about Project Cortex. Super exciting new announce from this fall season. My name is Adam Harmetz. I've been working on the SharePoint team for 15 years. I own the program management team responsible for the end user experience of SharePoint across Project Cortex, intranet portals, and business applications. I'm here with Sean today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sean Squires. I'm a PM in Adam's organization working on Project Cortex, and thrilled to be here today to share with you guys some of the new innovations we're working on here.
I'm going to embarrass Sean really quickly. 2 minutes before this began, it said Senior Program Manager, because yesterday he was promoted to Principal, which is a big deal at Microsoft. If you could help me give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thanks to a lot in the strong work in Project Cortex. So
thank you very much.
Appropriate segue into what we're going to do today.
Awesome.
Yeah, so, Project Cortex is brand new, so we're going to spend quite a bit of time framing it up, talking about our ambitions for the area. Project Cortex was founded really with customers, and so we're going to talk a lot about what the needs we heard from customers. We've been co-designing with special customer programs since the very beginning, and excited that we're starting to scale it out to private preview now and more broadly even next year. And so we'll frame it up there in the lens of the business problems we think we solve. We have some demos in early code, and it's going to cover the full range of what Project Cortex is about. Probably the biggest thing to understand is it does focus on knowledge and build a knowledge network. It also is a revitalization of metadata. It's also a revitalization of enterprise content management or content services. And so we'll try to frame that all up and leave you with a great impression of how you can use it every day. Sound good, Sean?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Cool. So I'll story arc for a few minutes right now. Project Cortex started actually with the need to reboot the enterprise content management and modernize the content services and ECM investments in SharePoint. So if you've been following the history of SharePoint since, frankly, the ESPC event 4 years ago, you notice that we have a modern SharePoint across intranets, across team sites with Microsoft Teams, with Biz Apps and Flow and Power Apps. But ECM is the one we've made solid progress, but what we hadn't done is had a big splashy modernization and relaunch of our investment in this area. And that's what Project Cortex is, and that's sort of the history of it. You'll see that we have an opinion as to where the content services market should go, but it's good to sort of start in that framing and history. And it is worthy of saying that even as we have Project Cortex as our opinion of where this market should go, we've been making steady investments in this area. For the first part, we reached 100 million monthly active users in SharePoint Online, which we think is really sort of setting up SharePoint in OneDrive as a default place to put files in the cloud. And of course it's used for your personal file storage, and of course it's used for collaboration and intranets. And our Project Cortex is also about ensuring that the default place to store files that have business process, that have metadata and need to be able to have high value content related to them are stored in SharePoint as well. You can see on the slide we've made investments in the basic areas of content service you'd expect in document management with bulk check-in and check-out and document sense, template across intranets for pages as well as enterprise templates for libraries as well. And announced very recently 100 gigabyte file size limit in SharePoint and OneDrive. And of course we continue to make big progress on our information governance investments. If you were looking for a whole bunch of information on that, you're actually in the wrong room right now because Navjot Virk is doing the information governance talk. You're welcome to step out if that's really what you wanted to talk about today. Right now is a talk on governance. And then of course, shouldn't be forgotten. In fact, if you want to know how we're organized, the team that Sean works on that has Project Cortex is also the same place in our organization where we home our Microsoft Search investments. Because you really can't separate Project Cortex, content services, and Microsoft Search. And so probably the biggest update in the content services market from us over the past year before Cortex was our relaunch of Microsoft Search, which is obviously an evolution of SharePoint Search, but brought up to the Microsoft level, and really bringing one of the biggest technical projects we've ever undertaken in Office 365 to provide a new core technology for search that moves forward search success rate and the way that search is embedded in major experiences. And you can see as of 3 or 4 weeks ago, the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant has Microsoft pretty well positioned in this market. And so that's where we started as we tried to think about, okay, what is the future of content services and where do we want to invest over time? And as we talked with customers, we heard some challenges I hope you all find pretty familiar. And to a certain degree, they're age-old challenges that have been around for a while. but we do really feel like they're hitting a tipping point given the growth of information that we've seen. Search has been okay, but the challenge of getting search right sort of interrupts productivity, people spending too much time discovering information. There are too many silos in an organization, especially large organizations, but even smaller ones. And you know, there's a bunch of tacit knowledge and expertise locked in individual teams that aren't being leveraged by the rest of the organization. And of course, from a protection perspective, there's a bunch of intellectual property that isn't getting protected because it's not being organized. And really, as people leave, especially with the gig economy, especially with the amount of changeover in the workforce today, you're seeing a knowledge drain. And so we saw all those challenges. And you can notice, sure, Project Cortex is, and the future of ECM and content services is about having a document library with billions of items in it. And it is about having structured process and metadata around this. But really, if you want to synthesize the business challenges and where we think the ECM market is going, it is really focused on these, this core problem of discovery and knowledge and search. And so that really led us to this mission statement for Project Cortex, which I hate to read slides, but I will actually take an exception right here just because I do think it is important to ground what we're doing today. And so in a world of rapid change and global skill shortage, empowering people to harness knowledge, upskill, and learn faster is the new workplace competitive advantage. And you know, what this mission means to me is a couple things. One is it really is a people-first centric mission. If you know Microsoft's mission all up to help people achieve more, it really is embedded in all of our experiences, especially for SharePoint, where before we might have been a very content-centric, a very repository-centric mission statement. This is really talking about how we're going to empower people in the organization, especially given the emerging challenges of discovery and skill shortage. And that's sort of how we approach and how we came to this evolution of a very repository-centric market in the past to something that was very people and knowledge-centric. And so, as I mentioned, we've been working with a variety of customers. Mark McDonald is one of them over the past 6 to 8 months. And I'm going to just roll this video that sort of synthesizes some of what has happening at that organization that we see as a pattern across many.
Mark McDonald are a global engineering management and development consultancy.
We're in the infrastructure business, so whether it be power or water or telecoms or transport, you've probably touched one of our projects whether you know it or not. Our mission really is to open opportunities with connected thinking.
Connected thinking is our approach for connecting content to people and people to content, enabling just-in-time information to allow projects and their teams to get their best value for their clients and for the business.
We have 47 practices globally, and what that does is ensure that people are sharing the knowledge between themselves and delivering that through to projects.
As an engineer at Mark McDonald, you could be involved in 4 or 5 projects per given day.
Everybody in the company is part of a different knowledge community, or possibly several. It's sharing that knowledge throughout the business, no matter which section you're in.
We think knowledge sharing is going to change extensively over the next decade or so.
We find that search is only half the story. We have to do something to assist people, to guide people to find the information they need that's relevant to them. I'm really excited by Microsoft's vision for creating knowledge networks. It fits completely in with our strategy for knowledge management. The idea of connecting people to content, content to people, powered by Microsoft 365, is going to be a game changer for us.
Cool. You know, and so that just sort of hopefully that mission of connecting people to content and content to people resonates. You know, I have to admit, I've been involved in the ECM industry for 15 years now. And part of me, when I first started this project, was just like, we'll create a new doc center, we'll put some modern UX on it, and we'll just call it a day. And it was really this working closely with customers that really got us to this pretty bold bet that the future of the ECM industry, the future of content services, is really going to be about more than just managing repository costs and scale, but really having a deeper relationship with the employees in the organization and how they're sharing resources. And so Montmac sort of exemplifies some of the stats you see on this slide, which is, you know, really, this is one of many stats you could choose to just show the actual cost to you and your organization of not managing knowledge as effectively. You know, just $55 billion could be saved annually by reducing onboarding time effectiveness by just 1 week. These are for large organizations from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And so you can just sort of see, putting in context in the voice of the customer, putting in the context of data, putting in the context of what we see as the global trends across this industry, it really gets us to Project Cortex. Now, you probably came to this session to get this question at least answered. So let me take an attempt to do it right now at sort of the 10,000-foot level, and then we're actually going to spend the rest of the time delving into the various aspects of Project Cortex to go in more depth. So this one slide summarizes, hopefully, something that seems pretty familiar from the setup we had from the past 7 to 8 minutes. And this is our long-term vision for Project Cortex. So the next slide is our investments and focus area for the next year in 2020. But before we do that, I think it's important because Project Cortex for us is a multi-year investment. And it is a real step change function in the industry, in our approach to content services. And it's important to understand our larger story arc, regardless of what we are choosing to deliver in the V1 incarnation of Project Cortex. But we really see this flywheel between information, learning, and knowledge. Now, this is not a new framing. You could have had a slide. In fact, in 1999, when SharePoint Project Tahoe was first founded, the first team name, before we even had a name of SharePoint or even the code name Tahoe, was PKM, Publishing and Knowledge Management. So this is an old area of investment, and there's plenty of triangles and slides you could build about the hierarchy of knowledge. But what we want to get a point across here is that yes, there is some element of information capture, and we do think that AI can make that a lot easier. But really, one of the core points of the slide is that we want to create durability in the knowledge that's created. Like, what is knowledge? What is the difference between knowledge and information? And it really is the ability to have your organization learn. And so bringing into what has traditionally been this repository-centric vision of ECM, the concept of learning, both in the moment and through corporate learning processes, through identifying expertise, bringing together that into the typical information overload problem that you see within repositories, and then having embedded knowledge within all those experiences, and also places within Microsoft 365 you can go to see and curate that knowledge is pretty important. And so, there's sort of two final points I'll make on the slide. One, something Naomi Moneypenny, the leader of the project, likes to say, is that we're in the business to do two things. At first, what we're really trying to do to convince you to invest in Project Cortex is we're trying to have you save money and save time. We've looked really hard for pain points that you are experiencing every day, be it uploading forms and processing them, extracting out metadata, whatever it is that is making your employees lose valuable time. And that will be your first investment in Project Cortex. That's how you can justify the IT spend. That's how you can get the project off the ground. But over time, we're trying to do something really bold and bigger than just saving time and money. We're trying to help you learn to learn faster. And this is where bringing in official corporate learning, this is where putting knowledge in the path that people are already working every day. This will be where you can invest in Project Cortex to save time and money over the short term, but fundamentally transform your organization over the long term. So that is our vision over the long haul. And then, as with anything, we have to make areas of focus when we first enter into this market and partner with customers. And so you'll see us evolve these slides as we get feedback on them. But this is sort of our areas that we're focusing on right now. One is identifying knowledge and identifying content that is subject to the ability to have AI automatically extract metadata and value to it. And so that's actually what Sean will go into in quite a bit of detail in just a few minutes. And then the ability to organize this. So we have neural network learning technologies that can actually look at all the data that's been identified and start to cluster it together and start to refine it and filter it and come up with an augmentation to the Microsoft Graph that has topics and projects as a first-rate concept within it. And this will be a mix, as all appropriate knowledge management systems should be, of curation by the end user, as well as AI to bootstrap it and get it started. And then delivering on the value of all this. Just because you have it organized doesn't mean it's actually delivering value. And so we have a tranche of investments to have just-in-time knowledge experiences in the path that people are already working everywhere, any day. And so if you don't already aware, from our Project Cortex announce, it's coming in the first half of 2020. We have a private preview program now that you can apply to if you'd like to be in. And before we get into the deep dive of something else, I guess one more framing statement on Project Cortex, which is like, why now? We had the honor of being able to present Project Cortex vision to Bill Gates a couple months ago, and I was like, oh no, how many knowledge management white papers has this guy read over the years? And how are we going to sort of say, like, why now is the right time to be able to invest? And I think there's a really two-part answer to that. One is, because it's Bill and because it's the truth, we think we have some unique technology that makes us different than previous investments from the industry in knowledge management. We'll go over some of that today, but the ability of AI to extract metadata, the ability to have that in the world's largest signal processing system in the enterprise, aka the Microsoft Search and the Microsoft Graph, and constantly looking across Microsoft Research and the industry for the best technology to bring to this is a real game changer. But frankly, even more important than that is the fact that customers, this has reached a tipping point for customers and their need for these types of things. Like I was mentioning before, as we went and invest in this and we were trying to rehydrate the UX and repositories, we kept coming back to customers telling us that it was an overwhelming problem that they're dealing with this area. And so this great combination is, I don't think we're generating demand for this. I think we're satisfying demand that has become a real crisis point, and we're trying to basically be a solution integrator for some really emerging AI that can help this problem. The last framing statement before we get into the detail is that metadata is back, and it's back in a huge, big way. Many people in this room maybe never doubted that fact, and we never did internally, although I get that in the product it's gotten a little long in the tooth. And we could debate whether all these investments are like part of Project Cortex or a little separate, just revitalization of part of SharePoint that Project Cortex uses. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because you will have a bunch of tools for managing and working with metadata. Everything you can see on the slide, from a modern user experience, and be able to select and work with content types, the refresh of the taxonomy UI, including be able to import taxonomies from industry standards and analytics on such things. Make sure search is aware of taxonomy and metadata, and then revitalizing their approach that we take for having content types, aka metadata, schematized across an entire intranet and an entire set of sites. And so we're going to go into the details on all that, but you can't talk about Project Cortex without first starting and saying, hey, metadata is back in a big way, and we're making a big investment in that. And of course, it'll be used for Project Cortex, but it's worth pointing out that these metadata investments are useful even if Project Cortex isn't what you're particularly investing in.
Absolutely.
So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sean, who's going to go deep in a particular area.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Thanks, everybody. So, as Adam just mentioned, yes, we are revisiting some familiar ground and amplifying that, because one of the things we want to emphasize with the release of Project Cortex is a lot of these capabilities, really the metadata service is a cornerstone of a lot of this, really aiding, taking advantage of existing investments you've made in the service over the years, building on that, but also really leveraging how can we enable the infusion of AI to facilitate the automation, the classification of your content, and the automation of the extraction of entities from it. Because we all know everybody loves to upload content and manually tag it, right? I'm probably the only one. All right, so what Project Cortex brings to the table is really this ability to leverage AI and leverage improvements that we've made to the overall service to really start doing smarter ingestion and then really helping with the automated classification and extraction of entities to essentially drive the metadata that goes into your SharePoint lists and libraries when you upload content at runtime. And then obviously another really important piece, and this applies even to the managed metadata service as well, is providing more analytics and insights so that you can act on the metadata that you're collecting. Because obviously the value of the metadata is going to really aid in improving discovery, automating and driving the automation of business processes, and also, as Adam mentioned, supporting governance. So it's important that we give you insights and visibility at the various levels, whether it's across the tenant and all of your content repositories, or all the way down to the lists and libraries within a particular site collection. So when we look at the AI infusion, we're actually looking at it as sort of like, this isn't exactly meant to represent that manual is the basic, and then the file classification entity extraction is the more advanced. It's more that they're solving different aspects of the same fundamental problems. And it's really around how do we facilitate that automation. Yes, manual works, but manual is also prone to error, and it takes more time. As you start to move up the ladder a bit, the automated object detection, we're doing a lot of improvements just to give you automatic abilities without having to build models, without having to do a bunch of overhead work. You can imagine a smarter image library that can automatically detect objects and images and then extract those, identify those objects and extract them as tags, right there that would just aid in and facilitate the discovery and retrieval of those images later through search. The other two, the forms processing and the file classification, are intended to handle two different classes of documents. Form processing is really ideal for more semi-structured documents like forms, invoices, receipts, things where you have really clear name-value pairs. That uses a particular type of tech, I'll show you guys in a second, using AI Builder on the Power Platform to effectively build a forms understanding model, publish it back to SharePoint, and then automate the extraction of that information from your uploaded forms. But then to go a little bit further, we want to maybe classify documents. And for those of you who are familiar with the Managed Metadata service, just to again show that evolution, a lot of the file extraction, file classification and entity extraction is building on our dear friend content types. So we're still using the same data structures to actually classify those contents, and also then the schema that the content type defines for those entities that are being extracted. And this is being done with some new technology that we announced earlier this year and talked a little bit about even at SharePoint conference, machine teaching. It's really about bringing machine learning to the masses in a more approachable way, and one that's a little bit more intuitive and really allows subject matter experts to participate in the process, because who knows the content best? So let's talk about those two last ones. The first one is the forms processing. So this summer, AI Builder was announced, and what it is it's one, AI Builder provides several models, model types that you can build using the Power Platform. And with those models, you can then infuse them into apps or use them for other places. What we've been doing is partnering with them to make that an option through SharePoint. So there's automatically a handshake between the services to really automate not just building that model, but like I said, publishing it back to SharePoint so that you can get up and running with an automatic extraction model using this AI Builder forms processing in just a few minutes. And as you'll see here, this is integrated. It works currently on things like PDF, JPEGs, and PNGs. I'll show you an example of this in just a few minutes. But what you'll see here is there's actually 3 different services in play here. There's not just the SharePoint library, but there's also the AI Builder model building on the Power Platform. And then also we're using Flow to automate when it actually gets the machine predicted values extracted from the uploaded file. It knows where to put them in the right place. And obviously you can elaborate on that form or even add another flow to expand upon that. The other piece is the file classification and entity extraction using machine teaching. And I want to emphasize that machine teaching is not machine learning. Unlike machine learning that usually requires large sets of labeled data and requires you to kind of go through and train the model and make sure it's doing the right thing and then refine it, and really takes somebody with a lot more skill and time to build these models and then to implement them. The intent of machine teaching, as it says there, is really taking advantage of extracting knowledge from the teacher, from the subject matter expert. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to always be the content creator, but this is a more integrated experience we're building into SharePoint that will allow you to actually build a smart content type, effectively build a model that will understand how to classify a type of content and also extract select elements that you've defined out of that content. So you can see that in that classification and extraction process, you can then go and get labels, and you do it through explanations, and you go through this iterative process of training your model. And then similar to the AI Builder process, when you're done and you can publish your model, then once that model's applied to a library at runtime, it will do the same thing. It will do the classification and do the extraction. Now, this particular machine teaching approach, which I'll show you guys a little bit in a sec, and for those of you who have either seen the Ignite video or even read some of the materials, we've been continuing to evolve this as we get this ready for ship early next year. So even the machine teaching interface, in fact, some of you might be in the audience who were joined us for a research session this morning, where we showed you some UI that's even different from what we showed in Orlando last month. So we're continuing to use our partner customers that Adam mentioned and folks like you and get that feedback and make sure that we're building an experience that accommodates your feedback and also addresses your scenarios to really build you an experience that is understandable and implementable for your business process. Now, this particular stuff, the reason why I mentioned this new template is because we have great plans for this new template, which really is just, you can think of it as a modern document center. It's called a content center template. Not sure what that'll be when we ship. But effectively, it's a new template that's intended, as it says here, for really becoming a central point for the management of large repositories of content. But initially, it's also going to be the place where you're going to go and build these machine teaching models. And you can then actually deploy them to the libraries where you need them in your tenancy. And then finally, as Adam mentioned a moment ago, a lot of it, and as I did, and you'll keep hearing us say this, metadata's back. We've also been making some great investments in the managed metadata service. It was important really for a lot of these capabilities that we're sharing with you guys today around Cortex to make sure that we had a strong metadata foundation. And we already have a very powerful service, but admittedly, it's a bit dated. So we wanted to make sure that we were continuing to enhance that. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the improvements that we've made there, really more around modernizing the UX, also updating the downstream controls that are used in lists and libraries, but also providing some new capability to make sure that we're giving you more control over how you syndicate or push content types down across your tenant, and then obviously providing the right analytics on the service so you can understand how your managed metadata term sets and even content types are being used. So with some of the UX updates, one of the things that should be no surprise is, along with a lot of the other admin center updates, we wanted to update the term store. But we also want to use this as an opportunity to really update not necessarily the content type hub, because you still need a place to store those content types, but we wanted to give you a modern interface to manage those enterprise content types. So we've brought that into the administration surface as well. So there's a new content type gallery that you can manage your content types there. We've also done some near-term updates. We've gotten great feedback from you guys. You're working with lots of term sets and you need more capacity. So we have bumped the online capacity of term sets in a term store up to 1 million. And then we've also are going to be working on some new APIs. Those will be coming out early next year, along with a couple of the things that Adam mentioned around the ability to better support industry standard taxonomies if you want to import those, things like RDF and OWL support. The intent there is to really allow you to leverage either existing assets or to address the concern that we've heard from people that just pains us, is if you want to work with your term sets, you have to actually somehow get them out or write some extra scripts to move and manage them elsewhere. We don't want you to have to do that anymore. Some of the Project Cortex additions that I've mentioned, analytics, super important. We've heard from you that you want to make sure that you understand how your term services and even your content types are being used. And then finally, we're also looking at some additional relationship types, things like related terms, and also making sure, as I know Adam mentioned a moment ago with search, making sure that search really reflects well the investments that you've made on tagging your content, so even with alternate labels, and making sure that we can expand those queries to include synonyms. And then finally, with the content types, we all know that once you get to a certain scale point with content type syndication, it doesn't work as well as it should. We are working on performance improvements there, but we also want to give you a little bit more control over targeting the right content types to the right locations. If you are in the finance department, you probably don't care or need the legal team's content types. So we want to make sure that we give you the ability to syndicate those department-specific content types via hub and the hub information architecture to the right places in your organization. So let's take a look at some of this stuff. And I just realized I don't know how to, I can switch, here we go. All right, so let's start with, this is the new Content Center site template. And so what's important to point out here is we'll be adding more functionality to the Content Center over time, but initially, what's really powerful about it is it's going to be the place where you are going to build a lot of your models for the machine teaching experience. These are the ones where you want to classify content and extract specific elements out of unstructured documents. The AI Builder piece is one that we're planning to make more pervasive across all of your document libraries, but for purposes of this demonstration, I will show you that within the Content Center as well. So if I were to, let's just go and create a new document library. I want you guys to see what this looks like. We'll just call this ESPC. And when I get my new document library, there's going to be a new action in the ribbon. And that new action is going to allow me to go and actually build an AI Builder model. And we're still playing around with where we're going to finalize the IEA. We're thinking about moving this under the automate with the other flow pieces. So know that this is prone to change before ship. But you'll see I have an option here to create a model. And what that does is it's actually going to kick me out to a new tab where I'm actually going to go to the Power App Platform experience. But more specifically, it's going to deep link me directly into the place where I can go and create a forms understanding model. Sorry for the delay here. With the AI Builder platform, you can actually build a number of different models. But what we wanted to do is make sure that as we want to make sure that we're giving you the right UX experiences for those different models. And so for now, we're starting you with just the forms processing one. So I'm going to deep link here. I'm going to go ahead and create this. And I have some purchase orders that I've already created. So let's go ahead and just call this model ESPCPO. And what I'm doing is I am creating a model here. And as I create the model, I'm going to actually have to upload some documents so that it understands what it is that I want to train against. And you'll see here that I've got some documents. Let me just open up one of these real quick. Whoops, let me upload some more. Sorry, let's go ahead and upload some more documents. I need more than one. I'm going to upload just a few more. The reason why I need more than one is I want to make sure that right now this is unsupervised training. And so what it's going to do is it's going to identify certain elements on these forms that I can use to extract metadata from. If it doesn't find some of the fields that I want, at this point in the development of the product, I can only do two things, either add more documents or be content with what I get. But we are going to be rolling out the ability soon next year for you to actually do a little bit more supervised training where you can actually specify if the system in its analysis misses a field that you want to add to your model. So what it's going to do now is it's going to go and actually scan these documents, and it's going to identify some fields that it can build a model from. And when it's done, I will then have the option of going and specifying what fields I want from the ones that it's detected. So as it loads this interface, you'll see here's the example of my document. It's sort of a structured invoice, right? And you'll see these things that are sort of highlighted are the items that it has detected. For purposes of this demo, let's go ahead and just select a few of them. We'll go ahead and grab date, PO number, and ship to. And you'll see over here I even have the ability to go ahead and relabel these. But I'm going to go ahead and keep this one, PO number. I just want you guys to keep track of what these labels are because you'll see that we are using these to actually build your model into the library when we publish it there. So when I'm done, I'm going to go ahead, I've got those three fields. Now I'm going to go ahead and train it. And what the training is actually doing is now it's building the model. Now that it's done the analysis of what it's detected, now it's going to go ahead and say, great, you've identified the fields that you want. Let's go ahead and build that model. And then once that model is done, I can go ahead and publish it. Now, most of what I'm showing you guys right now is really just, I could go directly to AI Builder. I don't even need to have SharePoint involved in this. And I can go ahead and build this model directly. And I might want to, so I can use it in Flow, use it in a Power App or something like that. But the purpose of this flow is we wanted to make sure that we were aiding the user from a particular scenario, like a SharePoint library, to go ahead and leverage this model. So you'll see here, now that the model's been published, I can go ahead and use it, and a new experience is going to come out. Now I'm getting the option to actually publish this thing back to SharePoint. So when I go ahead and select this, what it's going to do is it's actually going to kick off, it's going to kick me over to Flow, where I'm going to get an instance of a Flow template. And that Flow template is going to give me, right now it still has to do the authentication, but the nice thing about using the Flow template is we've already passed along all of the information from the SharePoint library as well as the other information that's needed for this flow to be able to operate correctly. So you'll see here that while the flow is here, I can go ahead and make changes to it, but otherwise I can go ahead and just save it, and I'm good to go. So let's go back to my library here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this. And do you guys see those three new fields? Yeah? Awesome. Oh, that's cool. But now let's see it do something, right? All right, so let's go ahead and actually upload some files. So now what I've done is I effectively have, let's go grab a couple of these down here. I'm going to grab just a few of these. Now what I'm doing is I'm runtime. I have effectively built my model. I want to extract 3 fields from it. I've published that model back to the SharePoint library. I've built my flow automatically from a template, pre-populated with all the right information. And what's great about that is by doing that, I actually get all this information, and you'll see that all that information is automatically being extracted as it does the processing, okay? Real quickly, I just want you guys to see one that's already complete, just so, because I want to show you something else that's very powerful, just to help you connect the dots between the power of these different scenarios. I have a document here. Let's go ahead and just, I want to upload a document to this. This is a library that I already built with another AI build model, with the AI builder, using the same set of files. What's important is these files are actually watermarked. So this particular file that I just uploaded, you'll see if I jump to the bottom of one of these files, it actually has at the bottom of it, it has a watermark that'll give it a status. So imagine the business scenario where I'm getting these purchase orders and I'm either approving them for payment or I'm going to go and reject them. But what's nice about that is because I've automated this experience, I can also do other things. I can actually go ahead and actually upload this file to the library and even have additional flow operating on this library. So in this case, when I've uploaded this document, let's go ahead, it's taken a little bit longer. All right, if it takes too long, I'm going to have to cheat and show you guys what it's doing. Effectively, this document, because it's already been watermarked with rejected, I can actually do things like what I've done here in this highlighted red field. So you'll see that this file has a PO status of rejected. So that watermark was actually extracted as a field. I trained the model to recognize that watermark. There you go. So that document I just uploaded 30 seconds ago, it actually extracted that watermark of rejected. And then what it's going to do is I have another flow on this library that's actually going to go and run on a timer job, well, we'll just run on a duration. And what it's going to go do is, since it was rejected, I want to go and actually let my team know. So what it can do is it can actually automate that messaging. And my point here is that you can start to see how these, oh, I lost my place. My apologies. There we go. So when this thing actually runs, once it gets, there we go, it just notified the team. So now if I go to that team channel, you'll see that I can actually post that information. So all being done automatically. Thank you. All right, let's look at one other one. So the other one is the machine teaching experience. I'm not going to walk through the building of a little bit of the model. That takes a little bit more time than Adam and I have. But I wanted to make sure that you guys could see what that experience is generally doing is the same thing. It's just that what this is doing is it's a little bit more integrated into the experience. And so what we're doing is we're giving you the ability to go ahead and define your model. And really what's happening is, again, as I mentioned, this is associated with the content type. So what you're doing is when you're defining your classifier, that's essentially the content type. What is this type of document? And so that training experience, as you'll see here, is we build you a new model homepage. And this is something I didn't even show the folks who joined us in Orlando. We've just been building this. This is hot off of the presses here. And this design is continuing to evolve based on usability studies and user feedback. But the idea is to really give you a landing place where you can build this model. So the model, in this case, is really a two-step process. Helping the system understand what a document is and what it isn't. That's your classification. And then going through the experience and helping it understand what entities you want to extract. And I'm not going to show you that full experience, but just very quickly, just to show you what that looks like, is when you go and create a model. In this case, if I go and create a model here, oops. Sorry. What happens is I go into this experience, I can go ahead and train like an extractor, and when I start teaching, effectively what I'm doing is I'm going through a set of sample documents and I'm labeling them. And when I label them, that helps the system understand what elements am I supposed to extract. And you'll see that what I've done is I can go ahead and label these things. When I test the model, after I've started doing some of the labeling, then I can check and debug as I need to until the model comes back and tells me, yep, this looks pretty good. And you'll see here that the files that I've labeled, they're showing up as green, so it means it detects those. But I can go to a document that hasn't even been labeled, and it'll actually go ahead and give me, whoops, not that one. That is one of the negative samples. This one, you'll see that even though I haven't labeled it, it has correctly figured out who the recipient is. So I can say, great, my model is working properly, I can go ahead and publish it. All right, in the interest of time, I want to quickly show you just one other thing. In the Managed Metadata service, we are rolling in some new experiences into the admin center, as I mentioned. And where you will actually start to see these is if we go back to that same library here, where I have these benefits notices, we are actually also building in new end user field controls. So if I go ahead and click on this guy, you'll see that in this experience, I've got a couple of managed metadata fields around the region and even the industry. And the region one is just a single value. And if I go ahead and pull this up, you'll see a very similar experience, but now using modern fabric controls with the ability to go ahead and expand and select and even do searches. And so we're really just bringing managed metadata column support into the modern library experience. And then finally, the other thing that I mentioned that will be happening at the admin center is you'll be able to actually designate these content types, define those with managed metadata, and even syndicate those across the environment. Okay. Adam, I think we need to get to the knowledge network before we run out of time. Thank you, everybody.
Well, we said metadata was back. Now do you believe it? Thank you, Sean. Yeah, we'll move on to the knowledge network in a second, but hopefully, you know, I made a joke right now, but you did see, like, our job is to look at emerging tech. You've seen this in your consumer lives, in Google Photos and social media, this ability to AI to harness knowledge and extract data. And this is just applying it to our lives at work in ways that are hopefully really grounded in scenarios that you need and can use every day. Every time I see this demo, I get even more energized, so super cool. Of course, that's great. That is how you identify. That is how you extract. But, and you can saw a bunch of ways you can use that sort of that have already existed in the system. Anywhere from search to processes and flows to slicing and dicing libraries to get metadata. But we have even more bold ambitions over time to allow you to learn faster, to put this in the course of knowledge, to do more than just extract metadata, but actually have it organize and provide value. And this virtuous cycle between AI bootstrapping the process and having experts be able to curate it. And that is really where the knowledge network comes in, and our investments in the augmenting the Microsoft Graph with topics. So, you know, I think we've talked about this already, but when you really think about knowledge, we talked about the captured part, but you have to sort of distribute that knowledge and actually sort of be able to use it, consume, and re-enhance that. And so that's going to lead us to this notion of what we just talked about today, is this part. What is in what is in this data? This is the extracting of metadata, but now you have to understand it and use it. And frankly, the best way to be able to do that is just to show you in the product what we have so far. You'll see some of the key themes we've talked about before there. And then we're going to talk about behind the scenes, how it's used, and also the IT controls we'll have over it as well. So here I am starting in a SharePoint news page. And you can see certain elements of the SharePoint news page have been highlighted in a clever different way. Juno, Atlas, and Falcon. Those are topics. Those are projects or acronyms that have been identified within my organization. And I can hover over that, and I can see what we call a topic card. So people are aware of the people card in Microsoft 365? Raise your hand. Yeah, and so it's pretty ubiquitous throughout Microsoft 365 now. And we envision the topic card being just as ubiquitous and embedded in a variety of experiences. And it provides the same sort of insights derived from the Microsoft Graph. You can see a description, it can see people associated with it, it automatically is kept updated with resources, and it's just a way where you can start learning in the moment. You can have those bite-sized elements of learning that billions of dollars that the US economy could save by having people be able to bootstrap their learning to be, whether they've been on the job a while or in a new job or taking on a new project within an existing job. Just be able to do that in context. And if I were to click through on the show more, what I see is what we call a topic page. And so, you know, when we launched this and described this to the Wall Street Journal, we sort of said it was an automatically generated Wikipedia, which for the metadata experts in the room and the SharePoint experts in the room, it's like, yeah, okay, that sort of gets it at that altitude. But let's go into more details of what that really means. And so the first thing to realize is that this is, yes, at first, auto-generated by the system, because this is what machines do best. They mine through a whole bunch of data, and they get you started, and they draw insights. But of course, it has an edit button on it, because that's what humans do best, is they add a sense of authority. They can curate the thing. They can figure out what is best for it. And so that is that right in context, that principle of having AI and curation come together all as one, using SharePoint as the basics for that. Now, if I scroll down through the page, I can see, first off, that the people card that I was mentioning before is right there, and you can sort of see you're starting to build almost a graph, because Megan, who is an expert in Juno, also knows Mark 8. So I can go through to the Mark 8 page, topic page, which is in the same Knowledge Center, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But let's go down more. In addition to the people that are related to the sort of a description and a people, you can also see key resources. And these can be curated. As you can see here, there's not particular examples of that, but also suggested by the system, because we're constantly mining data in the system, figuring out and making relationships to see if content might be related to this. And we'll talk a lot more about this later, but it is an incredibly important point that we respect the permissions that are already in the system throughout the entire stack. Nobody is ever going to see anything on this page that they don't have permissions to, and it is baked into all the way through the mining, to the extraction, all the way to the to what you see here on this page. And I'm continuing on. You can see related topics. So you see maybe we skipped over sites, which is also not only do you have resources and particular documents, but entire repositories that might be related to this particular topic. And then Naomi's favorite web part, as she told us this morning, these related topics. Because it's not just about creating these one-off sort of pages about a particular topic, but it's about drawing inferences about things that might be related to one another. We started the whole talk by talking about one of the things, that knowledge is locked in silos, that there's particular tacit knowledge that is staying within particular people and parts of the organization. And so not only is it in context showing you individual topics you might need, but you can go exploring, you can go spelunking through the topic graph, looking for things that are related, grokking that learning and looking for people and topics and resources that might be related, not directly to the thing you're looking about, but maybe adjacent to the things you're looking at. And so now we're going to go through a little more, and I'm just going to show you other examples of where the knowledge graph and topic cards show. So here I've typed a search query, which you can see Juno. That was the topic card, our topic that we were looking at earlier. And it appears in Microsoft Search. So we have basically an answers framework where search determines that if we think an answer to the particular query that's been typed in is a topic in the topic graph, we show specific UX that is that same, although in a different context and laid out in a slightly different way, the context we were looking before. Of course, that exists in Bing as well, because Bing uses Microsoft Search, or Bing has Microsoft Search within it. So you can see it there. In this case, you can search for things like experts in Mark 8. Experts in a topic brings back people that we know are related to topic. You can see that same data that you would see on a topic page for Mark 8 as well. And so that is a whirlwind tour of that. I'll have a couple more experiences I want to show. You might have to help me find the right tab here, Sean.
Here we go. I think it was this guy here.
We saw, so far the demos that I gave were about an individual topic card, and you saw that we existed within the Knowledge Center. So a Knowledge Center is one of the two new destinations we are unveiling within Project Cortex, the first being the Content Center that Sean talked about before. Now, you will get one by default if you are part of Project Cortex. You will get this Wikipedia for the enterprise, the central repository of knowledge. However, you don't have to use it. If you were saying, Microsoft, you're giving me way too many destinations. I already have a place where I manage knowledge. It's in my intranet. I have this existing site. Well, don't worry, because what the Knowledge Center really is just a bunch of web parts that you can use on your existing sites. Or if you don't have one yet and you're just trying to get bootstrapped, or you want from Microsoft the best way of putting this all together, you can use the one out of the box. And can you have multiple knowledge centers? Yes, just like you can have multiple sites in your intranet for various zones and scopes and permissions. It's just a SharePoint site under the hood. And just like a SharePoint site, of course, I can edit it. Ooh, wrong thing. So I can go ahead and hit the edit button and go down and, for instance, edit this page however I want, including adding a bunch of knowledge management web parts. And you can see a couple here, too, that you'd be able to add anywhere on Reach and Graph Viewer, things you maybe saw in the demo as well. You see LinkedIn Learning here, because as we talked about, over time, we have this vision of bringing in corporate learning and into the knowledge network, be able to have that in context, to have that in a central place for knowledge throughout the entire organization. A couple other things in the whirlwind tour we have in the couple minutes we have left that I want to show you. First off, topics are not just in SharePoint, they're an Office 365 wide concept. So here you can see a topic in OA. You can also see it in Word through its Smart Lookup functionality, where I've hovered over Project Core, click Smart Lookup. It's the same data, of course, laid out in context and differently as you'd expect. And then finally in Microsoft Teams, where what we have here is an enterprise knowledge bot, where I can sort of mention a knowledge bot and say, hey, this particular thing is related to this topic. Just a lightweight way of being able to curate. And so that is a quick tour of the knowledge network and what it means. And so some of the key principles that we've talked about here before I get to this slide are this notion of knowledge in context, all this notion of balancing AI, which can automatically bootstrap this, with the notion of curation, and this flexibility that you need, whether you want an out-of-the-box knowledge center from Microsoft because you're just getting going, or you've made a decade-long investment in knowledge, and all you want to do is supercharge your existing knowledge investment with a bunch of web parts using the graph. So I'm going to check on time. I
think we have about 4 minutes.
That says we have 4. I think we have, I'm saying that's off by 5 minutes if I'm looking at the time.
We have 10?
Yeah, I think we have, my watch says we have 10. That
we'll
only
stay
says
here
we
as
have
long
4.
as you guys will stay here.
So
right.
we're gonna end in 10 minutes, which means I'm not gonna rush through this, and I'll take a couple minutes to talk about it.
All right.
The TLDR of this slide basically is that we have super cool technology, similar to the technology we just talked about in the Content Center for extracting metadata, but different. It's neural networks and programmatic learning, probabilistic programming, for being able to mine topics. And it sort of goes through a 4-stage process. First, just like search, we're extracting a bunch of entities, then we group them together, and then we cluster those entities into systems using the neural network. And finally, based upon a ranking model of how confident we are in this clustering, we filter down to topics that we think we can suggest to you. And so what that all looks like at the end of the day is a suggested number of topics with basically metadata about topics, such as its definition, its acronym, the people related to it, and the related files and related topics, similar to what you saw on the page that was just generated before. And I mentioned this once, but it is worth mentioning again. This is an augmentation of the Microsoft graph, and not a new thing, and not a separate graph. This, because you can see everything that graphs has had between people. People have related people, they have related files, they have expertise that they're working on. We deeply integrated that existing graph with topics.
And if I may, real quickly.
Yeah, please.
Just because you saw that we've also are making investments in the managed metadata service, you might already have investments there that you're like, wait, these are great candidates for topics. So in addition to the new tech that Adam's talking about here to mine and build those topics through the AI, you can also explicitly declare what some of those topics are. That's another area we're working on.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, this, to a certain degree, this slide is the bet you're making in Microsoft to be able to say, hey, there is game-changing tech that can help us with this problem that we've had for multiple decades. And in just a couple minutes, I don't know if we did it justice, the whole point may be is that we have researchers at Microsoft that are experts in this area that are constantly tweaking the algorithms that we're using here, both taking the existing algorithms and making them better, and investigating in new ones. In fact, we've defined a flexible system for topic mining where we expect to plug in new clustering engines as time goes by, as we get the data and as we tune the algorithms, as we expand from our existing thing to private preview and worldwide. This will be a flexible, multi-year investment in always taking the best of topic mining and putting it into the Microsoft Graph and the Microsoft Search system in order to constantly get better at suggesting topics that can bootstrap the process.
Awesome.
You briefly touched on this, Sean, which is sort of the amount of control and IT governance we can have over the knowledge network. And we take this incredibly seriously. We've learned from perhaps what we would say is mistakes or learnings from Delve in its early days about the need for governance and control over that. And throughout the entire life cycle, everything from what content is included to how we generate topics and how we manage them, we've thought about the life cycle and the governance of things. So from content inclusion, you can choose what sites you want to include in the knowledge network. If there's a particular site you don't want to include it, or if you've even excluded it from search results, we will not include it in the knowledge network, in the topics for things we could sort of generate topics from, the repositories we could generate topics from, as well as sort of show as part of the knowledge network. And it integrates deeply with our sensitivity labels from the information protection investments. And then from topic generation, we already said, many companies will have things that they want to suggest for topic generation, existing taxonomies, maybe acronyms that they have from Microsoft Search, or they have specific topics that they know are, for instance, HBI, to high business impact topics that they just don't want a knowledge base page on, because that is super secret. And then, topic management is an ongoing investment area for us, both as we think about onboarding new customers into Project Cortex and what is their day 1 experience, as well as the day 90, the day 180, the day 2067 experience, where topics are constantly refined, they can be retired. It is your choice whether you want to say the AI is smart and confident enough that I can automatically take topics, or every topic has to be reviewed by an expert. And that whole life cycle is something that we are actively investing in, and from day 1 will be baked into the system, because I think that is incredibly essential to the success of the knowledge network. As we not only pair the expertise that you might want to enter with the AI, but also the governance and control, so you can be confident about using and deploying this. So that, according to my clock, says we have a couple minutes for wrap up. Do you want to cover roadmap?
Sure. Thanks, Adam. So we've announced this. It hasn't shipped yet, but it will be coming soon. I'm not going to drain the slide for you guys. Feel free to take pictures. Let me just sort of briefly summarize a couple things. There's already some search extensibility stuff that's coming very soon. There's also a few updates to the managed metadata service that will be coming very soon. Most of the managed metadata stuff, though, around content types and improvements to the term service overall, including the updated UX, all of those will come out more in line with the rest of the Project Cortex offerings early next year. The other things we'll obviously be working on is a lot of the knowledge management stuff with the topics and topic cards that Adam covered, as well as some of the model construction pieces that I talked about with the content understanding space. Finally, there's more search improvements that will be coming as well early next year. And then, yes, you know us, we are already thinking about what's next. There's so many things we want to do in this space. This is really just the beginning of a journey that we hope you guys will join us on as we continue to evolve these capabilities in the content services space.
So yeah, general availability in the first half of next year. It says apply to join the private preview, which you absolutely should do with this URL, but even more important is the fact a set of awesome resources. The demos that you saw today, you can actually download and run on your own machine. A bunch of scenarios and resources that can help you get started and future-proof yourself when you want to invest in Project Cortex in the future. So I highly recommend you visit that URL. In closing, I think this couldn't be a more exciting time to be involved in the content services and ECM industry. We're at a huge inflection point between the needs from you all in this room as customers that are getting to a tipping point, and this emerging AI that can really help with these problems in a way that has been promised before, but maybe has been let down. Our early signals have said that this is an incredibly exciting time where those two things are coming together. Please join us on this journey by applying for the private preview, or even beyond that when we get to general availability. This is an incredibly customer-centric bet, and we're looking forward to working with you all as we bring it to reality.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everybody.